Yeah.
How's everybody doing?
Good. You?
Good. We'll get started here in just a second. Okay. So back in the dungeon, plans for today are to finish the material that I need to say, which is really only just a couple of things I need to do before we're done with the content for the exam. And then I'm going to talk extensively about the exam in terms of what to expect and stuff like that and the procedure. And then I'll do like a review where I'll go over the problem sets and tell you which questions to worry about. So for now, let's do the lecture and then we can talk about the exam. Okay. So okay. So here goes. So last time what we did was we talked about taxes and elasticity. Okay. In particular, we talked about these things called excise taxes, which, if you remember, are per unit taxes placed on specific kinds of goods. So at the end, we did an example where, if I remember correctly, we had a pretty inelastic demand curve, right? So something like that, and a supply curve that was relatively elastic. So something like that. Okay. This is, of course, quantity, and this is price. And these two determine the equilibrium price. That's absolutely outrageous that I could not make that go there. Okay. Equilibrium price, P0, and equilibrium quantity, Q0. Okay. Now, what a tax does is for each unit that the firm produces, it increases the cost of producing that unit. Of course, assuming that the tax is levied onto producers, right? So we talked about like cigarette taxes being the most classic example of this, right? If a firm has to pay the government for every unit of the good they produce, then for every unit of the good that they produce, the firm is only going to be willing to supply it if they receive that much more money. Okay, that's basically the idea, right? So if the firm is only willing to sell the Q0th unit for P0, then after a tax is put into place, they would only sell that Q0th unit for P0 plus the tax because they know that after they pay the tax, they're only going to take home P0. In other words, right, a tax is going to shift the supply curve up by the amount of the tax. Come on. Damn it. Okay, so I'll say S plus tax, like so. That is going to give us a new equilibrium price, which I will call P tax, and a new equilibrium quantity, which I will call Q tax, like that. Okay. Now, being that this is the price, P tax, paid by consumers, the amount that producers are actually going to take home at the end of the day is this P tax minus the tax, which is exactly this distance here. Okay. So this is PP, like that. Okay. Now, if we label up everything on here, we can see that this up here is going to be the consumer surplus. Okay. The producer surplus is going to be this area down here. Okay. And then the government tax revenue is going to be equal to the amount of the tax, which is this distance, times the quantity transacted after the tax is put into place. Right? So this is the government tax revenue. Government tax revenue. And as you can see, we are now missing this chunk of surplus, which is a deadweight loss. Okay. So this distance between these two things is the tax, of course. Okay. All right. So here we can see that the burden is going to disproportionately fall on consumers, right? The amount by which the consumer price is increasing, the difference between P tax and P0, right? This distance right here is larger than the amount by which the producer price is decreasing, this distance right here. Okay, so here it's going to be consumers that bear the brunt of the burden. Now, we could also envision a situation where it is the producers that face a larger share of the burden, right? Now, as you might be able to expect, this is going to happen when it's demand that's relatively elastic and supply that is quite steep. Maybe I'll try and exaggerate it. Okay. So then in this situation, we have P0 and we have Q0. If you put a tax into place, it's going to shift this upward by some amount, the amount of the tax. So this is S plus tax. This is going to give us a new equilibrium price. This is going to give us a new equilibrium price, P tax, okay? A new equilibrium quantity, Q tax, and then the amount that the producers take home. Okay, you can already see what's going to happen here. Okay, so this distance right here is the tax. Okay, now if we label up the surpluses here, this is the consumer surplus. Okay, and this is the new producer surplus down here. Okay, and then this chunk here is the government tax revenue. Government tax revenue. And then this lost bit here is, of course, deadweight loss. Okay, here you can see that it is actually producers that bear the larger share of the burden because the amount by which the consumer price increases, this distance, is much smaller than the amount by which the producer price decreases, that distance here. Okay, so as you can see, whoever bears a larger burden of the tax is going to be the one with the more inelastic demand. Or I should say curve, whether that be supply or demand. Okay, so let's summarize that below here. Okay, elasticity, and tax burden. Okay, so over here on the left, we have a situation where supply is relatively more elastic than demand. So if supply is relatively more elastic than demand, consumers bear more of the tax burden. Okay. Hopefully you can get a sense of the intuition behind that statement. Okay. If supply is more elastic than demand, okay, that means consumers are much less sensitive to price than producers. Producers, being more elastic, are going to be more sensitive to price. So if consumers are less price sensitive, then firms are going to be able to raise the price more on those consumers. Meaning, when they experience a tax which increases costs, right, they can pass those costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices because consumers are not that sensitive to price. Okay, that's the idea here. Okay, so consumers are less price sensitive than producers. Okay, so producers can shift a greater burden to consumers. Okay, that's the idea. Now, over here, we have the opposite situation. Okay, if demand is relatively more elastic than supply, that means if demand is flatter than supply, then it's going to be the situation where producers bear more of the tax burden. Producers bear more of. Now, again, the intuition here is that if demand is more elastic than supply, then it's consumers who are more price sensitive than producers. So if producers experience higher costs and they try to pass those on to consumers in the form of higher prices, then consumers just aren't going to buy it at all, right? As you can see here, if you basically look at these graphs, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. Look at this demand curve. It's very steep. It's very inelastic, right? You can raise the price on consumers here and not experience too large a setback in terms of quantity. Here, if you try to raise the price on consumers, right, then a ton fewer consumers are going to buy. There's going to be a large setback in terms of quantity, meaning you cannot pass off your higher costs onto consumers. The supplier, the firm, has to eat those costs themselves. Okay, so then the idea there is that consumers are more price sensitive. Than producers. So producers are less able to shift the burden to consumers. Okay, how's that? Does that make sense? That idea makes sense? Okay, so I think that that's a really good way to kind of summarize what we did last time. Okay. Okay, any questions on that? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, sweet. So the last thing that I want to talk about is this deadweight loss, because I kind of mentioned this before, but deadweight loss is one of those concepts where after this class, you'll certainly be able to look at a graph and identify like what the deadweight loss is. And you'll certainly be able to like look at the triangle and calculate the size of the deadweight loss. But I need you to develop an appreciation for what exactly a deadweight loss truly represents. Okay, and what it represents are, in this case, lost value from transactions. Okay, in equilibrium at P0, Q0 without the tax, right, all the transactions up to Q0 are mutually beneficial for both consumers and producers because the willingness to pay for those transactions exceeds the willingness to sell, right? So all transactions up to Q0 are valuable and should happen. But once this tax is put into place, we do not transact all units up to Q0. We lose some transactions. Okay. The lost value from those transactions, the lost net benefit to consumers and producers from those transactions that are missing constitute the deadweight loss. Okay, that's the idea. So the reason that taxes are generating a deadweight loss is because they are throwing the market away from Q0. That's the idea. Okay. So one thing I'll say here with excise taxes, and deadweight loss, okay, is that taxes always generate a deadweight loss regardless of who bears the burden. Regardless of who bears the burden. Okay. And the reason, like I said, why do we get a deadweight loss? Because we lose transactions. Okay. The tax moves the market away from the efficient pre-tax equilibrium. Okay. Now, like I just kind of said in words, but which I'll say again here, specifically what happens is the tax prevents the exchange of goods and services, which generate net benefits to consumers and producers. Okay? That's the idea. In a free market, all of the units of the good, no, that's not entirely true, but it's the reason why it's not entirely true is technical. I'll just say it, even though I'm abusing language a little bit. In a free market, it's always the case, with an asterisk, okay, that naturally all units that generate net benefits to consumers and producers will be transacted. That's basically us saying the market will always be in equilibrium, and that equilibrium is efficient. Because every unit of the good for which the willingness to pay, the marginal benefit, exceeds the willingness to sell, which is the marginal cost, right? That unit is going to get transacted. Okay? In other words, if we think of this in terms of supply and demand, basically what's happening here, can I do that? No, I can't do that. Okay. If you think of this in terms of supply and demand, this is supply, and this is demand. This is P0, and this is Q0. Okay. The idea here is that all units up to Q0 have the property that the demand curve exceeds the supply curve. The willingness to pay exceeds the willingness to sell, right? And because we know the total surplus is the difference between these two things, okay, all units up to Q0 will add to total surplus. And so they should all be transacted if we want the market to maximize total surplus, if we want the market to be efficient. Okay, that's the idea. Now, when you throw a tax into this market, we know that it shifts the supply curve to the left kind of artificially because you're imposing a cost of production that's just flowing to somebody else, right? And it actually puts the market at a lower than equilibrium quantity, Q tax. Super hideous. Okay, Q tax. Now, at this lower equilibrium quantity Q tax, you can see that we no longer transact these units. But these units were mutually beneficial because the willingness to pay exceeded the willingness to sell. Basically, what's happening here is that the quantity we're transacting after the tax, the next unit of the good, right? Consumers would have been willing to pay, say, $20, and firms would have been willing to sell it for $10. So why didn't that exchange happen? It should have. Exchanging that good for any price between those two numbers would have benefited both consumers and producers. So it should have occurred, but it didn't. Okay. Now, because it didn't, we have lost the value from that transaction. We have lost this difference between what the consumer was willing to pay and what the firm was willing to sell it for. Now, that happens for all of these units up to here, all of these units that we know were valuable. This entire distance is the deadweight loss. It's the lost value from these transactions that didn't happen. Okay. Now, let me ask you a question. Everybody hear me?
Yes,
All
sir.
right. All right. I there was like a power surge at my house or something. Um well, that was weird. But oops. There was some kind of surge. Yep, he has returned. um if that happens, I mean, now I'm wondering if we're prone to that for some reason. I don't know. If that happens again, just hang on and I'll be back, as you can see. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for your patience. Let's keep going. Okay. So why is this? There we go. To be honest with you, I was kind of starting to ramble a little bit. So maybe this is a good thing. Okay. So now you've had a moment to digest all of that stuff. Yes, I did have a question, Steve. All of this stuff that I just said, you had a moment to digest that. So when you read this statement that I wrote, taxes always generate a dead weight loss regardless of who bears the burden. Based on what I just explained about why taxes generate a dead weight loss, maybe or maybe not, you can see that there's actually an asterisk behind this line here. Okay. Can anybody give me a situation in which a tax would not generate a deadweight loss? The answer is extremely specific, right? And it's theoretical. So it's not going to be like, oh, in this particular good, like it's a more theoretical answer. When would a tax not generate a deadweight loss? So let's think about this. Okay. Now, this is obviously an extreme case. That's why I was comfortable enough to write taxes always generate a deadweight loss. But there is one situation in which a tax would not generate a deadweight loss. And that is if, okay, look, why does a tax generate a deadweight loss? It moves the market away from the efficient pre-tax equilibrium, specifically in terms of the quantity. It prevents the exchange of goods and services, which generate net benefits. So when a tax doesn't generate a deadweight loss, apparently it will have not affected the quantity in the market. Now, when is that going to be? If demand is perfectly inelastic. Let me put that. If you have a demand curve that is perfectly inelastic, okay, like so, and you put a tax into that market, then as you can see, it's not going. Why do I keep making that look so terrible? Because I start trying to write the T before I write the plus. S plus tax. Okay. Then you can see it's not going to actually change the quantity in the market. You're not going to lose any transactions, and so you're not going to get a deadweight loss. Okay. Now, of course, that's quite technical. So I'm comfortable enough to say taxes always generate a deadweight loss because under normal conditions, we're going to be dealing with upward sloping supply and downward sloping demand. And in those cases, a tax always generates a deadweight loss because a shift in supply will always lower the equilibrium quantity. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to say is that in terms of elasticity, the more elastic demand or supply, the greater the deadweight loss resulting from the tax. Okay. And the reason for this, right, you can maybe see the intuition here, because if you look at this situation where it's perfectly inelastic, where there's no elasticity, okay, then it's the case that there is no deadweight loss. So as you creep up in terms of elasticity, you're going to get a larger deadweight loss. Here, right, this is zero, and this is zero. Basically, if you look at this demand curve here, the elasticity is equal to zero. Okay, because for any percentage change in price, there's a 0% change in quantity. Here, the elasticity for demand is, of course, greater than zero. We don't know if it's, exactly what number it is, because we know the elasticity is going to vary along this linear demand curve, but it's certainly positive. Okay, so as you get a more elastic demand or supply curve, you get a greater deadweight loss, as you can see here. And the reason for that is because when you have a more elastic curve, it is more responsive to a price change. So a price change is going to cause a greater change in quantity. And as we know, it's a change in quantity that causes a deadweight loss. Okay, so higher elasticity means more responsiveness to price changes. More responsiveness to price changes, which means tax moves the market further from the efficient pre-tax equilibrium. Okay? So that is the idea. Questions?
What did you say this one, where the elastic demand is zero? What did you say that one was called?
This is perfectly inelastic.
Perfectly inelastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, you bet. So this is... Okay. Which you remember because the I looks like that. This is one of these things that I'm explaining because I think it's fascinating. I'm not going to ask you this on the exam. Now, let me answer Steve's question by saying that as you can see in the problem sets, I think I've gotten into this before, but I get into a lot of detail that is not needed to solve the problem sets. Okay. I give that detail because I think it's valuable to know why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. Because there's a lot of people who you could like teach to solve a math problem, for example, but they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're just following steps. Okay. Like for example, my mom is possibly the worst math. My mom's smart in her own right, but she's possibly the worst person at math that I've ever met, ever. She is god awful at math, but she knows how to foil something. Okay. She doesn't know why she's doing it. She just knows how to do it. Now, for passing seventh grade math, is knowing how to foil going to get you the pass? Yeah. Okay. But true understanding would be understanding why that's doing what it's doing. Hopefully everybody knows what I mean by foil something. I'm certain that they're still teaching it that way, right? I mean, like now I'm getting really into like x plus y, a plus b, right? Foil stands for first, outer, inner, last. So you go xa, that's the first. Outer is xb plus ya plus yb, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Like, but knowing that why that is working the way it is because this is actually an application of the distributive property, then you know that's it. So here is the same thing, right? You can look at this graph, memorize the graph, and do good on the exam. That's what I'm saying. But there are certain people, myself being one of them, who wants to look at this graph and do more than just be able to replicate it, but actually understand, okay, why is this lost? Okay, like why is this lost? What is causing that? Now, do you guys see what I mean? So in that sense, when it comes to the exam, like memorization will get you what you need, right? But like a true understanding of the material means that you get that nuance. What would what would be an example? Brian, did I answer that question? Is that different from yeah? Okay, so hold on. So Brian, can you clarify what you mean? What would be an example of what? A good with perfectly inelastic demand?
An example would be zero demand,
Oh,
where
okay.
the demand didn't change.
Yeah, so an example of something with perfectly inelastic demand is like insulin for a diabetic, right? Because if you are diabetic, you need insulin and you are going to buy it whatever the price is. You see what I mean? So if the government were to be so absolutely evil as to tax the production of insulin, then that would not generate a dead weight loss because a tax would not change the amount of insulin that people are buying. They would just be paying a higher price. So there wouldn't be any dead weight loss. right? So what's happening there is you're just transferring welfare from consumers to producers. Is that different from unit elastic? Yes. Unit elastic means elasticity equals 1. And on a linear demand curve, that happens only at a single point. Problem sets are great at understanding the concept as a whole because of how, yeah. The problem sets are intended to be something where they are they are not getting too into the weeds of the explanations, but when you're doing the problem sets, if you have a better understanding of the background, then they are more enjoyable. And maybe they're not enjoyable at all, which, whatever, that's fine. But I think that having a more rich understanding of the nuance of things makes you more confident in that they are enjoyable. Thanks, Jalen. Okay, any other questions? So that is the content that's going to be on the exam. Okay. Did this all make sense? I think that this is somewhat sensible. But let me know. What do you think? Did this make sense?
You
Yes,
said,
yes.
why did you say elasticity equals 1? Is that what you said?
No. So what I was doing here, so let's I think that I was kind of confusing people. So especially because we had like the blackout, the gray blackout. So what happened here? So here I was saying that taxes always give you a deadweight loss. Okay. It doesn't matter if consumers or producers bear the burden. Here you can see that here it's consumers that bear the burden. On the right side it's producers, but in both cases there's a deadweight loss. There's always a deadweight loss. And the reason for that is that the quantity falls below the efficient equilibrium quantity. So you're moving the market away from the efficient pretext equilibrium. Why that gives you a deadweight loss is because it's preventing the exchange of goods and services, which are net beneficial to consumers and producers. Okay, that's what this diagram is showing. Now, then I pose the question of, okay, when would there actually be no deadweight loss as a result of the tax? And the answer is that the tax would have to be such that it doesn't change the equilibrium, that it doesn't change the quantity. It doesn't result in a lower Q tax. And that can only happen when demand or supply is perfectly inelastic. Okay, perfectly inelastic means that the price elasticity of demand is equal to 0. Okay. How's that, Marissa? Is that better?
Okay, I get that. I don't know why I thought you said 1 at one point. I was like, where did that
No,
come
I said 1 because Maricel asked me to clarify the difference between perfectly inelastic and unit elastic. And my answer to that was that perfect inelasticity means that elasticity is equal to 0. Unit elasticity means that it's equal to 1. So that was in response to answering a question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good? Everybody good? All right, so let's talk about the exam, okay? So we basically have an hour and 10 minutes to talk. Do we get out at 7:50 or 7:55? It's 7:50, right? I'm pretty sure it's 7:50. 7:50. 7:55 due to blackout. 7:50. Okay. I always forget. Okay, so let's talk about the exam. Exam 1. So for the exam on Thursday, do we have to schedule a time? No. So the answer to that question, Emily, is no. You just show up at whatever time. But I'll get more into that. Okay. Exam 1. Okay. So I'm going to start by giving you the logistics of the exam, and then I will talk about the content, give you hints, and tell you what to study. Now, the way that I view exams is I don't like exams being a surprise, okay? So I will not shy away from answering specific questions you have about the exam in terms of content, what kind of questions, things like that. Like my philosophy is more like I want to see you do it. You know what you have to do. I just need you to do it. Okay? That's kind of the idea. So, okay, let's talk logistics first. So, the exam is on Thursday. Thursday, June 4, okay? And it is at the WCC Testing Center, okay? I took your exams over there today, so they are in there and ready. Okay, it's at the testing center. Now, you can go to the testing center to take the exam at any time during the testing center's hours of operation. Okay, I would highly suggest, for obvious reasons, that you don't go right at the end. Like you know, use some common sense in terms of like when to go. Like, give yourself plenty of time. Now, if you get out of work at 5 and, you know, then it is what it is. But look online and you will see their hours. But it's very, you know, precise. Does anyone know when the hours are? Let's look together. Shit. I did not mean to X out of that. So here they are. Classroom and placement testing is on a walk-in basis. So you just walk in there. So Thursday, testing begins at 9. So you can get there at 9 and get it done. Last test given is at 7:15, but you have to be done by 7:45. So, you know, give yourself plenty of time. Now, I will say, I got to open up OneNote again. I will say that the exam, I have put it in there for 90 minutes. So 1 hour and a half. So it's not going to be the full 2 hours like here. It's going to be an hour and a half. That's how long the exam is going to be. Okay. All right. Good. So any questions about when, where, or how much time? Okay. So let's talk about what to bring. Bring a writing utensil. Okay. A calculator. Any. And a half sheet of printer paper. With handwritten notes on front and back. Okay. So the way it's going to work is when you get there, you're going to get the exam, and the exam is going to be typed out like a problem set. And then there's going to be a bunch of paper stapled to it. Okay. So you're just going to basically rip the exam off and then just write your answers on the sheet of paper. The testing center staff will staple it when you're done, and that'll be it. Okay. So you only got to bring what to write with. You don't got to bring paper or blue book or anything like that. Okay. The calculator is any. I don't care. And I specify that to the testing center. You can bring any calculator you want, okay? But you should bring a calculator, okay? Because you need to calculate those elasticities. And then your notes are the half sheet of printer paper, okay? Half sheet of printer paper with handwritten notes on the front and back, okay? Now, I could honestly, I could go all day about like the philosophy of the notes, meaning like why I let you do it. But I mean, the point is that the handwritten notes that you can bring in, the half sheet of paper, like that is intended to be a study and confidence guide. Like it really serves two purposes. One is confidence, okay? Because you're not going to have to memorize like the determinants of supply and demand. You can just write them on the paper. So then you go in there confident that you're not going to have a lapse of memory. Okay. Number two, they serve as a study guide because by looking at your notes and by writing the note card, you kind of like are doing studying, right? So the point is, by the time you have a note card, I keep saying note card, but it's a half sheet of printer paper, okay? By the time you have this half sheet, okay, done and ready, then you will not need it because you will have studied the material to make it. You see what I mean? So it's not intended to be like a saving grace, if that makes sense. It's intended to be a confidence thing. Okay. But, you know, be that as it may. Oh crap, I got a lot of questions. Okay. Hold on. So, Emily, I got your question. Jalen, 8 to 7 hours. Now, total questions, I'll get into that in a second. Autumn, on a computer, it's pen and paper. Pen and paper. Or pencil and paper, preferably. but there's no requirement. You can use pen if you want. Pen and paper. So you're going to go there, you're going to sign in, they're going to give you the exam, and they're going to give you paper, and you're going to complete the exam on the paper. Is there any chapters in the test book we can review for the test? I'm going to be completely honest with you, Emily. I would give you that answer, and I can if you want, but I think it's kind of a waste of time. I think you should spend any waking moment that you're studying on doing practice problems from the problem sets, because the exam is going to look eerily similar to that, as I will get into in a moment. Okay. Is there a proctor there who monitors our time? There's a proctor. To tell you the truth, I don't honestly know how the time works. You know, I've sent many people there over the years, and nobody has ever told me an issue with the time. So, Maria, yeah, that's correct. No phone calculators. Okay. I plan to put all the equations on a half sheet of paper. Yeah, do that and more. Because by the time the equation's on there, you'll still have plenty of room. Okay. And then Autumn says copy. Okay. Anything else? Okay. It like the intention here is that these exams are going to like mimic very closely the exact thing that the in-person students have. That's the idea. So you should think of it in the same way. Okay. All right, now content. So the exam is going to be 4 questions, okay? And those 4 questions are going to be as follows. The first one is going to be about supply and demand. Okay. The second one is going to be about markets and government. The third one is going to be about elasticity. And the fourth one is going to be about taxes. So no surprises at all. Okay. I think that somebody asked how many questions. There you go. Okay. So this is like, this is, you know, all I have to say about like what's going to happen. All right. And I'll get into specifics in a moment, but I want to make sure there are no questions. Good. Yeah, all the questions have multiple parts. So the 4 questions in terms of content, they are going to look identical to a problem set. Like basically the exam is 4 of the problem set questions. Okay. Should we bring a ruler? There will not be graph paper. It's just printer paper. Damn it. You could bring a ruler. There's a chance they don't let you use it though. I should have indicated on the instructions to bring a ruler. Yeah. I wouldn't, honestly, don't worry about the line sucking. I mean, duh, yeah, no. Do not stress over the lines. Like, do you see how my lectures look? I mean, God, like, if we were stressing over lines here, then I would have to be put on the stake. I mean, look at this. This looks like shit. Like, yeah, do not stress over the lines. He says don't worry, he has AI make his lines. Yeah, oh, I thought, yeah, I have the AI make my lines. But like, anybody in here who was in my macro virtual section last semester, good Lord, that was just disgusting. Because for some reason, the version of OneNote that they have at WCC, it doesn't have this feature where I can hold and get a perfect line. Okay, so I was like getting some absolutely abominable lines. Okay, the lines, don't worry about the lines. Okay, don't worry about them. Worry about what you need to worry about, which is basically if I say draw supply and demand and you do That's perfect. I think maybe you guys are worrying about the lines, but like if you were to see me in person and I was like drawing on the whiteboard, like you would notice that the lines are never perfect because we're drawing them, right? So when you're drawing it, there's like the graphs are not going to be perfect. Do not worry about that. Okay. All right. Is that better, Mackenzie? Yeah, do not stress over the lines. Perfect. Okay. So the last thing that I want to say is this, which is that this first exam in micro, even though half of it is review, if you look at this, half of it's review, right? Supply and demand is something that you already did. Okay, markets and government, most people did that, but I know that like Greg doesn't do consumer producer surplus. So some of it's review, some of it's not. But like half of this exam is review. Despite that, this first exam is always the one in micro that has the lowest score in the class. Okay. Now, basically, I am not here to like fail everybody. That's not going to happen. Like if the scores are bad, then I'll just add points. I'll just like curve that. I won't do like an actual curve. I won't do an actual curve, but like suppose that I look at the average and it's like 65. Okay, then maybe I'll consider like adding 10 points to everybody's score. You see what I mean? Yeah, I'm not like it's not there's not going to be a situation where everybody gets 40 and then the average is like 40. Yeah. We're going to talk about, Steve, we're actually going to talk about that kind of behavior later in the class. It's what's called the prisoner's dilemma. So the idea is that yeah, just because I'm gonna be like, I don't know, I don't want to sound like, look, okay, I don't want to sound like an ass and I don't want to sound like pretentious or whatever, okay, but I'm just gonna say it, which is that most of the econ classes here are multiple choice exams. Everybody knows that. So is there a way for me to like, I wish there was a way for me to put like a poll in here. But like I'm just curious, like how many of you had your macro exams were multiple choice? Yep. Yeah. Yep. So I personally despise, I mean, as you can tell, like already with the problem sets, like I despise multiple choice. So I just don't make it multiple choice. But like when you transition from doing multiple choice to doing a short answer exam, like that can, even though it's no more challenging, it can be a mental barrier to get through. Okay. That's why in a moment I'm going to tell you exactly what problems are going to be most important. Okay. So do not, it lets me know that I understand. You mean the multiple choice lets you know that you understand, or the short answer? Yeah, the short answer. I mean, that's my entire thing, right? There's two things, which is that I think short answer is better for seeing if somebody actually understands something, number one. But number two, I mean, like I'll be damned to pass an economics student without seeing them draw supply and demand. Like that concept to me that you can pass an economics class without drawing supply and demand is bonkers to me. So that's why I make them do it. Okay, I'm kind of rambling here. So let me go into the problem sets. Hold on, I'm going to stop share for just a second while I pull up the problem sets, and then I'm going to go into the problem sets and the practice problems, and I'm going to tell you what's what. Okay. All right, so here's what's what. Problem set 1 and 2 are posted. Now, I just saw in my Canvas inbox a little bit ago that a bunch of people have submitted them since I graded the last batch. So I will grade those tonight, okay? And once the problem set is graded, you have access to these three items, which are the solutions and then practice problems. Practice problems are basically, as you're going to see, like practice problems 1 is just more stuff. It's just another problem set 1 with different questions. Excuse me. So let me download all these things. Okay, so here's what we have. So that means that you basically have 4 things that are the most important things for your studying. Okay, problem set 1, practice problems 1, problem set 2, and practice problems 2. So as you can see, like practice problems 1, it's just another problem set with more problems that you can do to practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each problem on each problem set and practice problems, and I'm going to tell you, you know, how important it is. Okay. Like, should you be able to do it? Okay. So number 1, yes. Okay. Yes. You need to be able to be given a prompt and analyze with a graph how it affects supply and demand. Like, and this is exactly what's happening here with that. Okay. So this one, yes. Number 2, I'll say like maybe. Okay, like obviously, if it wasn't obvious, number 2 is not going to be like a model question on the exam. Number 2 is like too easy, right? You're just shifting one single curve. Like it's yeah. I mean, maybe like knowing how to do it isn't going to hurt you, but it's not going to look like an exam question. You know what I mean? If you have any questions while I'm like rambling, then just thanks, Jalen. Then just stop me. Number 3. Yes-ish, maybe. Strong, maybe. Light, yes. It's not a full yes. I'm not going to waste an entire question on the exam having you do a bunch of number crunching, right? This question was a bunch of number crunching, okay, especially C and D. Now, when you see challenge on a problem set, that means it's definitely not going to be on an exam. I put challenge questions as like a why the hell not question, like something that I'm like, oh, well, I think that this would be something interesting to ask, so I put it. But a challenge question is never going to be exam material. Okay, so this question, I don't know, light yes, strong maybe, but it's just too much number crunching. Okay. Spoiler alert, you should be writing down every single word I'm saying in terms of like which question and then what I say about it. 4, definitely. Definitely. Okay. Definitely. All right. I'll leave it at that. You absolutely 100%, without a doubt, that's why I say definitely, need to take equations for supply and demand and know how to work with them. You need to know how to determine the equilibrium price and quantity. You need to know how to draw them. You need to know how to shift the curve when given a numerical shift. For example, here, there's an increase in production costs amounting to $5 per unit. Okay, that, as we know, is going to shift supply to the left. But seeing the $5 per unit should tell you that it's going to shift upward by exactly that $5 amount, right? So you need to be able to be given a numerical shift amount and then apply that to an equation. Okay, so this question, Definitely. 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 Okay. 5. What's going on with this one? Yes. Yeah. This is a good question to know. Okay, it's not a model question. But yeah, this one's good to know. Okay. Yes. 6. A lot of people have a lot of problems with 6. Like they see the letters and panic, but the letter is representing an area. So like with the price ceiling, consumer surplus is A plus B plus D, right? This area, this right here. When I was grading the problem sets, you guys didn't have too much problem with that, but some of my previous classes have had a lot of problem with that. But I'm not gonna. This question, I will say maybe. Yeah, maybe. Like, I'm not going to spend an entire question with this lettering system. It doesn't give me enough flexibility in terms of things to ask. So I'm going to say maybe to this. Like, knowing how to do it is not going to hurt you. Like, spending time on this is not going to hurt you, but this is not going to be something like you see on the exam. Okay. 7, definitely. Definitely. Okay. Definitely. All right. Any questions so far? All right, the 7 is definitely. 8. 8's. Thanks, Steve. 8 is yes-ish. Yes-ish. I think 8 is a little bit hard. Just because like taking the equations, translating them to a graph, putting the price ceiling in there, and then solving for everything. Like this is a mathy question. There's no doubt about it. It's a bit challenging. I'm not going to give it a full yes. I think giving it a full yes would be a little bit misleading. I'm going to say that it's a yes-ish. It's not I don't want to say maybe because it's more important than a maybe. I'm going to say yes-ish. Okay. Okay. All right. So that's problem set 1. Okay. That's problem set 1. So, practice problems 1. Let's do this one. Again, this one's available to people that have submitted problem set 1 or will submit it, soon enough that I can have it graded before Thursday. Number 1, this one's repetitive as hell. Maybe, strong maybe. There's stuff in here that's valuable, but this question's way too repetitive. I mean, you can see there that I literally ask 5 times, is there a shortage or surplus in this market? I'm not going to waste 5 exam questions asking if there's a shortage or surplus. It's not happening. Okay. So yeah, this one's a strong maybe, not a full yes. It's a strong maybe. It's just too repetitive. Okay. 2, yes. I'll always say yes to a question that's like, here's a bunch of random scenarios. How does that affect supply and demand? That's good practice. Okay. So this one gets a yes, a clean yes. 3, definitely. Okay. This is definitely. If you look at 3 on practice problem 1 and 4 on problem set 1, so both of these are definitelys, then you can see that these are very similar questions. Okay. I give you equations for supply and demand. Okay, here I present them a little bit differently, but I'm giving you equations, and then I tell you to calculate a bunch of stuff, right? And then I have you shift it. Okay. And then I have you numerically shift it. Okay, so this 3 is an important question. It's definitely coming on the exam. The exam question is going to look eerily similar to this. Okay. 4. What's going on with this one? Yes-ish. Strong maybe to a yes-ish. It's very mathy of a question. Very similar to what's going on with this one here. So yeah, doing it is not going to kill you, but it's also going to be harder than what's going to be on the exam, I think in its totality. Okay. So I would give this one a yes-ish. Strong maybe to a yes-ish. Okay. 5. I'll just give this a clean yes. This one's would be a fair question. The macro question on markets and government is very similar to this on the macro exam. This is just good practice. Okay, very good practice for calculating consumer producer surplus, identifying areas, how ceilings and floors affect market outcomes. This question's long as hell. So while I'm saying yes, it would be torture for me to put a question that goes up to R on the exam. It's not going to go up to R. But, you know, yes, this is good practice. Okay. 8. Or no, sorry, this is page 8. This is number 6 on practice problem 1. This one I will give it definitely. Yeah, this is very, as you can see, this is like damn near identical to this question. Okay. The only difference is that I think this one is a price floor and this one is a price ceiling. So basically, it's either going to be a floor or ceiling on the exam. Okay. This is definitely coming. 7. I'm going to say yes to this one. I'm going to say yes to this one. I think that this is just more good practice for dealing with price control. So I'll say yes to this. It's not a model question. Elements of it are extremely important, but it's not going to, the question isn't going to look exactly like this, I wouldn't say. Okay, so I'll say this one, yes. Maybe even strong yes. I would not say definitely to this one, but I would say yes. Okay. All right. So that's problem set 1 and practice problem 1. How are we doing so far? Any questions? Do you guys want to take a little 5-minute break? I kind of forgot to even ask. Nah, okay. Okay, I should have asked earlier, but I mean, we're not that far over. I'll just keep going. Okay, so problem set 2. Here we go. Problem set 2. Number 1. God, the scale on this graph is hideous. Hold on. All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
All right, sorry. So 1 on problem set 2. Yes. Okay, you definitely need to be able to compute elasticity using the midpoint formula. I mean, you're going to have to do that. That's coming. Okay. Now, this question is another one that's repetitive as hell. So I'm not going to waste an entire question having you over and over and over and over doing that kind of thing. Okay. One thing I will say that people always miss is when you look at this question, let's look at like this one. Okay. Look at what this question says. Using the midpoint formula, compute the price elasticity of demand. That's a number. Okay, so it's going to be a number like 4. Then interpret the value means put that number into words that anybody can understand. So the interpretation of that number is for a 1% increase in the price, quantity demanded falls by 4%. That's the interpretation. Then the classification is whether it's elastic or inelastic, which in that case it's elastic. See what I mean? So when I say interpret the value, that means put that number into the words that we can understand. Okay. I saw some issues with that in the problem set, so just so you know. But as a whole, 1 gets the grade of yes. 2. I'm gonna say strong maybe. I hesitate to say yes, and the reason I hesitate to say yes is because the point of this question was really to reconcile like the midpoint formula with the idea of getting the elasticity at a point like we get with unit elasticity being equal to 1 at one point along the demand curve. So I kind of try and get you to like in your brain reconcile the difference between those two things and see what's happening here. And so exam questions are not well served with questions that are like trying to get you to understand something like this. You know what I mean? Like the point of this question was to get you to understand why the midpoint formula won't give you 1 at that midpoint of demand, like where it's unit elastic. Like it was intended to like walk you through that logic. So because of that, like this would not be a good exam question. But the concept of working through it is valuable. It's just not a great exam question. Now 3 is a great exam question. And for this one, I will give this one a extremely strong yes. I don't want to say full definitely, okay, because it's not quite a model question, but it's damn close. It's the closest thing to definitely I could possibly say without it being a definitely. It's an extremely strong yes. Okay. That's what I'm going to say for this one. Okay. 4. Yeah, 4 is like light maybe. It's actually, I'll just say maybe. Yeah, I'm not going to waste a question on something like this. I'll give it a maybe. Okay. Five. Five, definitely. 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 It is coming. It is coming. Okay. This is very, very similar to what we did in class. So this one I'll give a definitely. Okay. 6 is a yes. I'll say it's yes. Okay. Knowing how to do it is important, but to me, it's not quite a model question. That's what I'm going to say about this one. Okay. 7, no. I think this is actually the first no. 7, no. Like, you can basically, I mean, you could read this question and tell I put this on here because I felt like I had to. Like, no. Like, once you know how price elasticity works, then all the other elasticities are easy to understand, interpret them, and classify them. So I'm not going to waste a question on something like this. This is not coming. Okay, no. Plus, this is literally just like definition, right? And given that you have a like half sheet that you can use for reference, like definition questions are kind of lame. So no. Okay, so last set of problems. This is practice problems 2. This is available to people who have submitted problem set 2, which again, if you've submitted it and I haven't graded it yet, I will. Okay, so don't fear that. But this is practice problem 2. So number 1, I'm gonna give this one a very light yes. I want to say maybe. I'm tempted to say maybe, but I don't quite think it's a maybe. I think it's closer to yes than it is to maybe, but it's definitely not like a full yes. I'm not gonna say yes. I'm not gonna even say like yes-ish. It's a very light yes. Okay. The concepts here are good, but like I even say in this question, like feel free to use a graphing calculator to assist you. So here you can see we're kind of going to get a little bit lofty here. So conceptually good, not exam material. Okay. 2, definitely. Ish. Like it's do I want to say definitely? It's not. It's again, it's very, very similar to this one in that it's the closest thing to definitely without being a definitely. Like if you look at problems 3 on problem set 2 and 2 on practice problem 2, they are both extremely important, but neither of them are like a true model question. So I don't want to say definitely, but they're both very close to definitely. And if you were to fuse them, trim the fat a little bit, you would spit out a definitely. Yes, it's very similar to that in terms of the importance that I'm giving it. Number 3 on practice problem 2, I'm going to give this one a maybe. This one I put in there to help you understand something, which is the difference between saying demand is elastic and saying demand is relatively elastic. I mean, you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. Excuse me. Explain why we call demand relatively elastic, even though you show that demand is inelastic over a particular segment. Again, we know that all linear demand curves have an inelastic segment at the bottom, right? Even curves that we would call relatively elastic, those are flatter than some other curve. It's just that that portion that is inelastic at the bottom is still more elastic, right, than some other curve which is steeper over that interval, right? So this is trying to get you to see the difference between relatively elastic and just plain outright elastic. Okay, that's the idea. All right. That's the idea with this. So I'll say this one's maybe. 4 is like a light maybe to a no. I put this in here because I don't know. This is super easy question. I'm just gonna say very light maybe. I don't want to say no because when I say no to a question, that means you are literally going to hurt yourself by studying it because it's going to take away valuable time that you could be studying at something more important. Okay. When I say maybe on a question, that means that it's not a model question by any means, but understanding the concepts are not going to hurt you. Like knowing what relatively elastic or relatively inelastic looks like is going to be valuable on the exam, right? You see what I mean? So this one, I'll just say maybe. 5, definitely. Okay. It's not as much. I would honestly say it's not as much of a definitely as this one. 5 on problem set 2, but it is a very important question. Okay. So I'll say definitely to this one. Now you can kind of see here that like me giving you a graph and asking you to analyze it and the effect of attacks on that market, it's coming. It's coming. 6, yes. Okay, 6 is a yes. It's the same exact thing as 6 on problem set 2. This one, demand is relatively more elastic. This one, supply is relatively more elastic. So it's just going to change the burden, basically. Okay. It's literally the difference between these two things right here. Okay. Seven. Actually, that's funny. I forgot that I made a question that was talking about this thing right here. Okay, so here is a situation where a tax does not impose a deadweight loss. This is not coming on the exam. This is more of a like, oh, I thought this was a fun question. Okay. That's it. Okay. Now I'm going to say like you right now, if you didn't have me in macro right now, it's hard for you to develop the appreciation of these reviews, but like I'm being completely honest when I say like after you take the exam on Thursday, you are going to see exactly that it is the problem sets. There are no surprises at all. All of the questions that were definitely are coming exactly in that form on the exam. Now the numbers might be changed a bit, right? But that's where it's like something different for you to work at. But yeah, okay. So you're gonna see on Thursday that this isn't like literally. It's going to look exactly like the problem sets. Okay. Questions. This one, for number 7, I'm gonna say like no. Like I'm gonna like whisper no. Like I would like you to be able to do it, but I'm not gonna ask it on the exam. It's just I don't know. It's a little too in the weeds, I think. I'll say, okay, my official grade to 7. My official grade to 7 is an extremely light maybe. Extremely light maybe for 7. Just because I think it's valuable to, for example, if you look at 7, suppose an excise tax of $25 per unit, draw what happens to the supply curve. Like you should be able to do that. You should know how to do that, and that's coming on the exam. So like it's not as if this question is completely out there, right? All right. Now, for those of you that don't have questions, like I have no new material to give. I have no new anything. So you're like good, but I'm also more than happy to stay and show you how to do certain problems if you need help, right? So if you are good to go, I got nothing new to say, and I'm not going to say anything more about the exam. Well, I might if somebody asks me, but like I have like you will be fine on what I said, right? If you want to stay, then yeah, there's no class on Thursday. There's no class on Thursday. It's just the exam. It's just the exam. That would be I don't know. That'd be kind of unfair to me because like the in-person classes that meet for 2 hours each time, like they dedicate a class to the exam. So I think it would be a little bit unfair to have class and an exam when it's obviously the case that the exam, had it been an in-person class, would have taken place on that day. So no, there's no class on Thursday. Questions? Thanks, Jalen. Can I go over practice problem 3 on, so which one, Steve? There's, okay, so let me answer Maria's question. So Maria, I resent in my assignment that I forgot to upload. Yeah, so if you, like, if I look at your assignment and I see that you clearly, like, forgot to upload a question, I'll just put a comment in there. And then, yeah, once you resubmit, it'll look like a new submission to me, so you'll be all good to go, Maria. Thanks for letting me know. So practice problem 3, number 3, Steve is looking for. This one. I am more than happy to do this one. And I think this one is extremely important. Okay. So how do I want to do this? Maybe I'll go half screen, half screen. Let me make this as... This isn't distractingly small. You can still read this, right? I think so. I just don't want to go like... Okay, so here is number 3 on practice problem 3. All right. Number 3. All right, so the question gives you a demand and supply curve, okay, in equation form. And it starts by saying determine the equilibrium price and quantity. So when I see that quantity demanded is equal to 100 minus 2p, and I see that quantity supplied is equal to p over 2, right? Then when I go to get the equilibrium, I am going to set quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied, right? And then I'm going to have 100 minus 2p is equal to p over 2, like so. Now, when I add 2p to both sides, really this is 4 over 2p. So it's going to be 100 equals 5 over 2p. And so as a result, this is going to be 200 equals 5p. And so p is going to equal 40. And then so p is going to equal 40. And then if I plug in 40 to either of these, you'll see it's 100 minus 80 or 40 over 2, both of which are 20. So Q equals 20, like so. Okay, so this is A. That's the equilibrium price and quantity. Okay. B, I say in equilibrium, calculate the consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total economic surplus. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky because you need to draw both of these curves. Okay, so let me scroll down. So if I have QD equals 100 minus 2P, if I write that in terms of price, I'm going to get that P equals 50 minus 1/2 QD, right? You can see that I'm going to add 2P, subtract the Q, divide by 2. Yep, so I'm going to get that. Okay, so that's going to be demand. Okay, and then supply, if I have QS equals P over 2, then that tells me that P equals 2QS. That is supply. Okay. Now, when I go to draw this, I have Q, P, and now for demand, I'm going to start here at 50, like so. And then it is going to come down to 100. And then supply is going to be 2QS. So at 100, it's going to be 200. At 50, it's going to be 100. So this is 50. At 25, right here, it is going to be at 50. So like this. Okay, so there you go. And then the equilibrium, we know, happens at 40, 20. So all of that was set up so that I can calculate consumer producer surplus. This area is the consumer surplus, and this is going to be equal to the base of the triangle, 20, times the height of the triangle, 10, divided by 2. So that is going to equal 100, right? It's going to be 200 divided by 2, which is 100. And then this is going to be the producer surplus, and the producer surplus is going to be the base of the triangle, 20, times the height of the triangle, 40, divided by 2. That is going to give us 400. So the answer to this question is that consumer surplus is 100, producer surplus is 400, and so total surplus is 500, like so. Okay, good. Okay, and then in C, suppose that the price in this market is 20. Okay, what is the quantity demanded? What is quantity supplied? So we know from demand that quantity demanded is equal to 100 minus 2P. Now, at a price of 20, this is going to be 100 minus 2 times 20, which is going to give us 60. Okay. And supply is quantity supplied is P over 2, right? Which means that quantity supplied, if the price is 20, is going to be 20 over 2, which is 10, right? So as you can see up here, if I put in a price of 20, right? Clearly, it's going to be the case that quantity demanded is going to exceed quantity supplied, right? In this case, we know that when quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied, that means that there is a shortage. Oh, the answer to this question is just quantity demanded equals 60, quantity supplied equals 10. Okay, and now I was getting ahead of myself. Is there a shortage or surplus? Well, clearly there's a shortage, right? Because the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied, and the size is going to be equal to that difference, quantity demanded minus quantity supplied, which is equal to 50. Okay, very good. Now, E says using a graph of supply and demand. Okay, so suppose the market is in equilibrium and there's a decrease in the price of a substitute good. So when the price of a substitute good goes down, I'm going to buy more of that good and less of the good that's given, right? So if we're talking about the markets for PlayStation and the price of Xbox goes down, then my demand for PlayStation is going to shift to the left, right? So when I draw this graph of supply and demand, I'm going to have quantity, price. I'm going to have supply. Okay. I'm going to have supply and demand, right? Here, I don't have to worry about exact numbers because I'm just drawing a graph to illustrate the effect here. Q0. But demand is going to go down. The demand is going to shift to the left, and that is going to give us P1 and Q1. Okay, so predict the effect, and then we would just say that the price goes down and the quantity goes down. So that's the predicted effect. Okay. All right, now this is important. Okay, F is super important. This is by far on the exam the one that people miss the most. Okay, so those of you, the 12 of you that stayed are in great shape because this is by far the one that people miss the most. Suppose that it is specified that as a result of the shock described above, okay, that shifted demand to the left, the willingness to pay for this good changes by $15 for every level of quantity demanded. Okay, now let's think about what that means. If we have a demand curve, okay, like this, demand is like this. Okay. And if I say the willingness to pay changes by $15, first of all, the fact that the price of the substitute good goes down means that demand for this given good is going to go down. So really, when I say the willingness to pay is going to change by $15, it means that the willingness to pay is going to decrease by $15. So when the price of Xbox goes down, for every quantity of PlayStations, we're going to be willing to pay $15 less. Okay. For whatever reason, right? Now, what that means is because this height of demand represents the willingness to pay, right? If the willingness to pay decreases by $15, right, then this distance, this new willingness to pay, this is going to be 15, right? So the new demand curve is going to cut in like this. Oh boy, that looks like shit. Hold on. Boom. The new demand curve is going to cut in like this. Okay, so this distance is going to be 15, right? Now, how do we portray that mathematically? Well, given that the demand curve is quantity demanded equals 100 minus 2p, right? You are going to be tempted to just subtract 15 from this. That probably would have been a lot of your first instinct. Okay, now, here, that is not what you do. Why? Because the demand curve, as I've showed you here, is giving you for every price, what is the quantity demanded. So if I subtract 15 from here, that would be a decrease of 15 units of quantity demanded for every price, not a change in the willingness to pay for every quantity. So I need to rearrange this first. I need to rearrange this as I did up here when I graphed it. Where did I graph it? Right here. P equals 50 minus 1/2 QD, right? So I'm going to get P equals 50 minus 1/2 QD, like so. Now this is describing for every quantity, what is the price going to be? What is the willingness to pay? Now on this, I can simply subtract 15. So the answer here is that demand is going to be P equals 50 minus 1/2 QD, now minus 15. Okay, so I'm going to get that the new demand curve is P equals 35 minus 1/2 QD, which you could rearrange if you wanted. Okay, you could rearrange and say that QD equals 70 minus 2P if you want to rearrange it. Do you see how just subtracting 15 from this wouldn't have given you the right answer? Right? So it's important that you think through what these demand curves are representing. Okay. Now, with this is the new demand curve. So this is actually the answer to F. Okay. Now with G, we simply use this new demand curve along with the original supply curve to figure out the equilibrium price and quantity. So we have QD equals QS, right? So QD is now 70 minus 2P equals QS, which is P over 2. So again, we're going to have 70 equals 5/2 P. So that is going to be 140 equals 5P. And that is going to be what? 28. So P is 28. And so then Q is going to be P divided by 2, which is 14. Okay, now how do we know we did it right? Because our prediction here was that the price falls and quantity falls. Our original price was what? 40.20. Our new price is 28.40. So indeed, the price falls from 40 to 28. Okay, quantity falls from 20 to 14. So it is consistent. Okay. How's this? Yeah, it's a big problem. Does that make sense though, Steve? Yeah, I don't think there's anything in here that's particularly ridiculous. I think if we look question part by part, I'm just like, this is by far like people screw this question up. Yeah, it started clicking. Good. I'm super happy you asked this question. I'm super happy you asked this because without a doubt in my mind, this right here is always the most missed question on that first exam because people do not conceptualize how to actually shift demand. They just start throwing numbers at it, right? They just throw 15. Now, here's what I want to say, okay, to the how many people are left in here? 11. So the 11 of you that are in here, I need to be very clear about something, which is that when you take a multiple choice exam, okay, you develop a sense in your brain because it's true that each question, right, is kind of uncorrelated with the one before it. Once you do a question, you get it right or wrong or whatever, and then you move on. You don't have to worry about that question. Here with these questions, you can see that they build on each other. So I had to use the information from A to calculate to calculate B. I had to use the information from E to make sense of F. I had to use F to get G, right? So everything builds on each other. Now, for a lot of people that are taking this exam, that ends up becoming an enormous mental barrier because it makes them think that they need to get, for example, A right before they can do B. I'm telling you right now, for those of you that are in here, I cannot say this loud enough, which is that your success on any given question is uncorrelated with your success on the previous question. Okay, what do I mean by that? Suppose that you do F and you completely screw the pooch. You totally drop the ball. You frankly have no idea what you're doing, so you just write a bunch of random crap in there, okay, for F, which happens. As you're going to lose points on F, no doubt about it. But as long as you use your answer to F correctly in solving G, you will get full points for G. So screwing up F will not automatically mean you lose points on G. As long as you use that incorrect answer consistently and correctly moving forward, then you're fine. Does everybody see what I mean by that? Please, everybody, tell me that they understand what I mean by that. Okay, 100%. More. I need more like confirmation. Yes,
That is
exactly.
like the method.
Exactly. Okay, that's really, yes. That is so important because people that take this first micro exam, a lot of people end up doing bad because they get stuck on a question. Okay. They get like a lot of people, I've seen them do these exams and they get at this question and then they're staring at A, for example. And they're like, I have no idea how to get the equilibrium price and quantity. So let's think this through. Suppose that I get to A and I have an enormous brain fart and I have no idea how to get the equilibrium price and quantity. So I'm sitting here, here's 3, I'm at A, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea what the hell to do, right? If you have no idea what to do, then just write something. Just write something. And then in B, use this information correctly so that you can get the points in B. You see what I mean? Do not leave stuff blank and move on. Like, you need to, stuff builds on each other. So be strategic about how you do this, okay? Now, in this case, you would only lose points here. As long as this is correct based on this, you will get the points there, okay? That, like, I need everybody to understand that, okay? So when you're taking the exam, please don't forget that. Okay. Any other questions? So that was a phenomenal choice by Steve because this question is hugely missed on the exam. Any other questions? So I would suggest if there are no more, if there are no more questions, then there's really nothing else. But I would truly suggest, sit down and give yourself 90 minutes and do the 4 I mean, it's going to be 4 questions. If you were paying attention, you were taking notes, you're going to know exactly what the 4 questions are. Okay. So there's a definitely for supply and demand. So this is basically the supply and demand question. There's a definitely for the markets and government, the price control one that I said was a definitely. And then there's 2 definitelys on the elasticity one that are going to make up the exam. So you know the 4 questions that are coming. Sit down with those 4 questions and do them in 90 minutes. Get a sense of what your pace needs to be. Okay. It's going to be easy to lollygag and try and look for perfection on a question, but yeah. Okay. All right, any other questions? Or do you guys want to call it a night? All good? All right, William. Yeah, I'll be sure. Thanks. Appreciate the review. Yeah, you bet. So yeah, Autumn, if you want to just hang out for a little bit. Thanks. Appreciate the review. Yep, you bet. Any other questions? Anything else? Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Steve. Good luck, you guys. We'll so we don't have class Thursday, so we'll talk about the exam on Tuesday. I'll have the grades in. Maybe I won't by Tuesday. Normally I'm super fast grading the exams, but I'm going out of town this week. And so I may not have them in by Tuesday.